My name is Lydia Parker, and I am the Field Product Specialist with the Climate FieldView team for Eastern Canada. I live just outside of Guelph and have been with the team for 4 years. And today I'm going to take you through how to use Climate FieldView's field health imagery at harvest timing. There are a number of different ways that we can use that information to help us, whether it comes to planning for harvest or actually using it while we're sitting in the cab at harvest. So I just want to take you through a number of different ways to use it, and then also provide the opportunity to answer any questions that you may have. We will be going for roughly 30 minutes, and we were planning to save 15 minutes at the end for questions, but feel free to ask questions throughout. If I go to the next slide, down at the bottom of your screen, there's a little speech bubble. If you click on that, you will be able to type in questions, and we will actually maybe try and answer those throughout the presentation, just because we'll be touching on a number of different things. So if we can kind of keep it relevant to what we're talking to, then we'll try and do that. If I am not able to answer your questions today, we are committed to getting answers back to you. So we will follow up with all attendees with questions. If I'm not able to answer them, we'll find that answer and circulate that after the presentation. Like I said, this is being recorded and it will be uploaded to YouTube following the presentation as well. So if there's anything you want to reflect back on or find an answer to, you will be able to find that as well on our YouTube page. So with that, I think we will dive in. This is just a quick agenda of what we're planning to cover today. So we'll start by covering off the different types of field health imagery, and just some specific information around them and how we can use them in our operations. About how we can use those images for planning at harvest timing, and then how we can actually use them in the cab during harvest. So the first section we're going to cover is field health images and the different types we have. I'm just going to flip over to my iPad screen, and we will get started. So there's two different places that we can look at our field health images in the Climate FieldView platform. You can in the full FieldView app, and maybe it'll be helpful if I just go out to my main screen. We can find those images in the full FieldView app, which is the black icon, and we can also see them in the cab app, which is the one that you use when you're sitting in a piece of equipment. We're going to start with the full FieldView app, this black and orange one here. It's a really great way of looking at your images without having to go through individually one at a time. So I'm just going to click on that tab, and it's going to pull up all of the fields that I have in my account and the most recent satellite image that's attributed to that individual field. We do provide 3 different versions of the same image every time a new image is available. And those different versions are called scouting images, which are what you see on my screen right now. You can see that I have those selected. And one of the other versions is called vegetation images. And is a true color image, which we will get into a little later when we start looking at specific fields. But basically, all of these are different ways of representing the same information. So I'll start with kind of where we get our images from. We work with various satellite providers, and they have satellites that are obviously circling the planet, and they take photos as they fly over. And so what we do is we receive those images in, and we begin by processing them to create these different versions. So the images that we receive are essentially an NDVI image, which basically provides measurements of live biomass that's in the field. And so vegetation images are one of the first ways that we'll process that information. And basically what we do is we take the data that's within the image that we receive, and we assign a static value to it. And what I mean by that is if I scroll down in my screen, you'll see that the ones here at the very top are quite dark green. And then as I get towards the bottom, I start seeing fields that are a little more yellow, and then eventually some that are brown. And so if a field has no biomass in it, that means that your vegetation map will show up as brown. So we could probably assume that these might be wheat fields that have been taken off because there's no biomass left behind. Whereas these yellow ones, if you're in Ontario, these might be soybean fields that are starting to dry down, and therefore the amount of biomass, live biomass, is starting to decrease. Whereas these dark green ones here up at the top are more likely cornfields that are kind of in their prime as we head into fall. And so the reason these are really helpful is that they're relative across your entire operation. So a dark green map always means lots and lots of vegetation, whereas a green or a brown map means very low vegetation. So these are good for comparing fields side by side. And what I mean by that is if we take a look at, let's say, this demo prescriptions field and this Kingsbury's orchard field, if these were both cornfields planted on the same day, they have similar fertility, similar genetics, all of those sorts of things, we'd be expecting them to perform similarly. But we can see that this demo prescriptions field actually seems to have more biomass because there's a lot more dark green pockets in it, whereas this Kingsbury orchard field is slightly more yellow. And so that means that this one is probably, if we're heading into the fall, is starting to dry off quicker and therefore is losing live biomass. But if this was springtime, we could also say that this one's further behind. Maybe it was planted a couple of days later, or it was on drier soil and didn't have as good of a start, or whatever the situation is applying to your field. These just help us understand that when we have like features, how we can compare them across your entire operation. So as I said, vegetation maps are relative across the entire operation, and they show us how live biomass is accumulating in the field. Scouting images, on the other hand, this demo seed treatment field, for example, we take the data that lies just within this field boundary and we break it into 5 buckets no matter what. So every field is going to have red, yellow, light green, medium green, and dark green. And so what red is telling us is the area of the field that has the lowest biomass, and the dark green is showing us the area of the field that has the highest biomass. But what I want to caution is that red does not always mean bad, and dark green does not always mean good. The way that we create these maps is we force the information to be broken into 5 buckets, no matter what the biomass swing is from red to green. So if I went and walked into this field and started scouting it, this could be very stunted, very weak, very far behind corn, and this could be, you know, perfectly growing, thick, lush corn. But in another field, the difference between dark green and red could be, you know, nominal to the naked eye. You might not be able to detect a difference at all. So these maps do not replace on the boots or on, but they do help us understand that if we are going to go do a scouting effort, how do we make the best use of our time? So if I was going to go into this demo seed treatment field and I really don't want to get back to these yellow pockets to check on them, and let's say, you know, the entrance to our field is along this part, I may not want to check the headland because there might be something going on here that's going to obviously bring that biomass down. But if I only walk partway into the field and check out this pocket and it looks exactly the same as some of these dark green pockets, I might not need to make the effort to go all the way to the back corner, especially if it's a hot day. And we all know that that's not something that we necessarily want to do. So that's kind of the general difference between them. I like to think of vegetation as being, oops, sorry, my iPad screen just shut off, as the entire operation, and scouting is relative to just the single field. So a couple other things that I just wanted to share would be kind of our frequency. The frequency of images really depends on whether we can get them or not. So there's lots of things that will affect whether an image shows up in your FieldView account. As I said, we work with satellite providers and they're constantly circling the globe taking images. But if that satellite passes over your field at nighttime, it's hard to use that image correctly, so you won't get that. If it passes over on a day like this, I don't know about where you are, but where I am, it's completely gray and raining. So obviously a satellite that's passing over, the only thing they're going to get a photo of is a cloud. And we obviously cannot provide NDVI data with a cloud. If a cloud is covering a large portion of your field, we also won't provide you with a map just because it's going to skew the data. And another one that we need to watch out for that we may not always think of is cloud shadows. So even if it seems like a sunny day and the clouds aren't directly over your field, if that cloud is projecting a shadow onto your field, it's also going to skew the data and not provide you with an accurate map. So we have a cloud detection technology that we run as these images come through to pull out any of those images that aren't going to be useful to the end user. At the end of the day, there's always a chance that one will slip through the cracks. And that's why we have that true color map that I referred to at the beginning that I'll show you when we dive into an individual field. So that's kind of frequency. So we typically say you'll receive an image every 2 weeks. But again, if we have really cloudy weather or we have the off chance that the satellite's kind of passing over at night, that may be stretched out a little further, and you may also get images kind of back to back a couple days apart. So it really depends on what we can provide you, but we do try to give you as many images as possible. The resolution of the images is typically a 5 by 5 meter resolution, so relatively sharp. It's not as sharp as, say, a drone image, but satellite imagery is something you're going to get more frequently, as opposed to a drone image that you either have to go capture yourself or hire another company to come out and fly. So they will provide you with relatively the same information. These will just be slightly lower resolution than a drone image. Our satellite imagery is available throughout the growing season. So typically they start becoming available in March and they will run through till November. And I'm trying to think, I think that's all I kind of wanted to cover for the differences between the two types of maps. Now I want to kind of start moving into that second section, which is how do we use the field health images at harvest timing to help with planning? And so if you can see in the top corner of my screen, there is a crop types dropdown. And when I click on that, it's going to give me a list of the different crops that I have in my account for this season. So right now it's selected as all crops. So all my corn and soybean fields are showing up on this screen. Whereas if I select just corn, it's going to just the fields that were planted to corn this year. And so the way we can use this to help plan for harvest is actually not by using the scouting maps, but by using the vegetation maps. So I'm going to toggle over to those. And we can see that my back 30 field is quite green. This south field is starting to get a little bit less green. This demo tillage field is yellow, and this agronomy site is brown. So these are not true cornfields. This is just made as a demonstration to show you how you can use this. But we could assume that this is either a completely dry cornfield or perhaps even one that's been harvested. This would be one that's nearing harvest timing. And these ones are still a little further out. So because these images, as I said, are relative across the entire operation, we can use this tool to help us understand of all the cornfields or all the soybean fields or all the wheat fields in my operation, which ones can I start harvesting sooner than others, and how can I start planning my time so that I can start planning which fields we're going to hit first. The other option to use, if you have, obviously there's only 4 here, but if you have a large number of fields in your account, this can still be, a little hard to sort through. So here in the upper left-hand corner, mine actually defaulted to high biomass because I've been in here before today. But what it'll typically default to is just newest. So it'll show us which field has the newest image. So we can see that this one came in on August 27th, whereas this one came in on August 19th. If you want to sort by highest biomass, you just click that drop down again. And we'll click on it, and it'll bring the field that has the highest to the top of the list and the lowest biomass to the bottom of the list. So again, if you had a giant list that looked more like this, you could scroll to the bottom and out which fields are getting closer to the time of harvest. I'm going to just jump back to my PowerPoint presentation and give you an actual example of how a grower used this. So let me just get to. So this is an example of a farmer. This is a wheat field from 2018. And he was harvesting this wheat, and there was a big storm that was coming up, and he really wanted to get this field off because it was going to snow. And he obviously wanted his wheat off before that. And so what he did is he took the headlands off and he started combining back here in this northwest corner. And you can see that in this northwest corner, there is a lot more of this dark green biomass than there is, say, down here, kind of on the southern half of the field in general. And so when he started cutting into this field, the moisture he was running into, I believe, was around 20%, which was too high. And so what he decided to do, because he really wanted to get this field off and was concerned that he would lose the majority of this field to a snowstorm, he actually drove his combine down here towards where the lighter green areas are and the red is. And the average moisture kind of in this area of the field was actually down at 13 or 14%. So what he did was he actually used this map on his screen to harvest, so that as he was traveling through the field, he knew to kind of stay away from this northern central portion of the field, and was able to get off the majority of his wheat before the snowstorm came. So just a way that we can use the data that we actually have in our account to help us plan with harvesting and plan where we want to be in the field. So yeah, that was just an example of how a grower actually used it in their actual operation. The other thing that I wanted to cover, I'm just going to jump back to my iPad screen. Sorry, let me just get. Is the option of using drone images, same thing, to plan for harvest timing. So you have these images in your account. Like I said, we do have a frequency of roughly every 2 weeks, but if you're kind of getting to harvest timing and we've had lots of cloud cover and you're just not seeing an image come through, drone imagery in the Climate FieldView platform is a complete other option that you can use. So if you have a drone yourself and you're able to process that imagery, or you want to work with a drone provider such as Devron or any of those folks that are out there that can capture that imagery for you, drone imagery is another great option to help capture some kind of aerial imagery to help you plan for harvest, if that's something that you're interested in doing, especially if it comes to planning which fields you're going to harvest first, or what pockets of an individual field you may want to harvest. That is definitely an option. Drone imagery comes into your account in a number of different ways. So if you work with one of our partners, like I mentioned, Devron is a partner here based out of Ontario. We have what's called an API built with them, and we can think of that as a bridge between the two companies, which means if you sign into their website with the Climate FieldView, with your Climate FieldView login, they will receive your field boundary information so that they know where to go. And then once they've flown that field, the drone image will show up directly in your FieldView account for you to use. Otherwise, if you're capturing it yourself and you have a way to process it, you can use our data inbox on the website to bring that in, and it will show up as an image as well. In that case, I'm just going to click on an individual field to kind of show you where that would show up. Because it would be coming from a third party, it would not show up in this list. This list is strictly for FieldView provided imagery, if that makes sense. But if we open up and clicked on one, we would find that in this drop down here at the top of my screen. So I'm going to just click on that. And you can see I'm under field health right now, but it would show up under other imagery right here. You would click on that and it would bring in the drone imagery that either a third party provided or that you uploaded yourself. So now that we're on an individual map screen, I just wanted to show you how you can look at the images for an individual field, because back in the field health imagery tab, we were just looking at the most recent image for all of your fields. If you select an individual field, you'll get this list down the left-hand side that shows you in chronological order all of the images you've received for that account. So we can see if I scroll all the way to the bottom, the first image that this field received was on March 27th. And like I said, this field is planted to, I believe this is a cornfield this year. Yes, across the top. It was planted to corn, and so obviously early in the season, we don't have a lot of biomass accumulating, but we can see in June, this June 5th date, some corn starts to show up, and then as it continues to grow, we get darker and darker green until we get to August 19th. And then as we continue into the fall, that color will start reverting back towards yellows and then all the way down to brown. So that's where you can see all of your images. You can just select them and it will. If you want to split your screen and see how one image varied from, let's say we want to see the difference between July 15th and July 20th, I'm just going to click this little book icon in my upper right-hand corner, and it will split my screen for me. And then to find your images here, you actually have to pull open one of these drawers at the bottom. So it doesn't matter which one you select, but I'm going to click Scouting to change this back to vegetation, and I'm going to do it on the other side as well. And then I'm just going to pull the drawer up. So I'm holding my finger on this little line here on my iPad and just dragging it upwards. And I can just select a different image side. You can also do this with obviously your planting maps, your harvest maps, whatever map images you have in here, you can pull up and compare them side by side. So I'm just going to jump that screen. Actually, sorry, let me just go back to the split screen because I just want to touch on how this is helpful at harvest timing. You know what? Scratch that. I'll talk about that in the cab app. This is where you'll see those images. I wanted to touch on while we were here is that true color image that I've referred to a number of times. So I'm just going to go back to the vegetation image, and I'm going to go to this July 15th because it looks like there's something wonky going on. There's a pattern that's showing up here that didn't show up 10 days earlier or 5 days later. And so that tells me that this might be one of those fields that fell through the cracks. And so to see the actual image that FieldView received, we're going to click on this little cloud here in the bottom right-hand corner. And it's just going to switch over to the actual image that we received. And yeah, you can see this black spot right here. This is a cloud shadow that's likely coming from this cloud over here. So we want to, when we're looking at this, we may actually want to disregard this area and not either not send somebody to go scout this or spend time going to scout it because this is obviously an error with the image that we received. It's not an actual issue that's popping up in the field. So that's the true color option right here. And if I click on it again, it'll just jump me back to the image. That's kind of how we can use satellite imagery before harvest. During actual harvest, we would be looking at our satellite imagery in the Climate FieldView cab app. So I'm just going to go back to my main screen and open that app instead. And to get to those satellite images, we're going to click here on the map icon. So I have this demo field, but we can actually go look at the field that we were just in, back 30 if we want to. And I click this drop down on the right-hand side, and that's where I'm going to find my satellite images. And the reason I said I like actually looking at them to search for images in the other app is because in here, they're just listed out as lines. So if I click on Field Health, it's going to give me August 19th, August 14th, and all the dates backwards. And then when I select one of those, it gives me my different options. So my scouting map, my true color map, and my vegetation map. So you can access all the images here. It's just a lot more user-friendly to access them while you're in the full FieldView app, the black and orange icon. So again, I'll just go through that one more time because I know it's a number of steps to access them. You select your field or you're actually harvesting this field, you'll just select this rightmost drop down where it would say yield or whatever map layer you're looking at. Oops. It'll come to this screen. In season, then field health, and then the specific date you're looking at. So if we want the most recent one, we'll take this one. And we'll select the image. Let's say we want to look at our scouting map, just that or did to determine which areas of the field he was going to harvest. And so this is great because we can also combine with this on half of our screen. So if I split my screen, show an example in because I don't have harvest data for it. But as we're traveling through this field with the combine, you can imagine that as I have my screen split, I can be looking at how the crop is coming off and compare that to these different regions in the field. And we know that satellite images can often, I'm going to say almost be predictors of what the final yield map is going to look like. And so we can start using this as we travel through the field to start detecting patterns that we see in the yield map and how they apply to either the scouting map or the vegetation map as you're passing through the field. And this is important, especially if we're going to start looking for patterns or trends that happen in the field, because while you're sitting in the cab, that's really the time where we can start wrapping our minds around and understanding, did a certain trial I run work out a specific way? If I did a hybrid side-by-side, can I start seeing which one did better than another? And we would start recognizing those by seeing very specific linear patterns in the field. So actually, let me jump to field. Sorry, let's look at south field that I have because it shows very interesting patterns in it. So if I go to even this one, vegetation, so we can see this field is showing striping. So if we're traveling through the field and we're noticing that we're getting this striping pattern on the satellite imagery, and it's following, the yield map is following suit, that this is showing up, really green, and this is kind of yellow, and this part's showing up red on our yield map. We know because these are very straight lines that this is likely a man-made issue. So it's either different hybrids, different seed treatments, different fungicide applications. Was there a spray or miss? All of those different things that are very square, and we can start using the maps that we've collected throughout the season, whether those are planting maps or application maps, to really pinpoint what was the issue, if there is one, or what worked well if we were trying something. So let's say, this area of the field was sprayed with a fungicide and this part of the field was left. Well, then this is a pretty good indicator that spray application worked. And we can see that and kind of almost ground truth it with our satellite imagery as we're passing through the field. Whereas if we start seeing kind of wonky lines that don't make a lot of sense, we can assume that that's probably more of a natural issue. And we can really use these satellite images to start pinpointing when that issue occurred. So if we went back to that back 30 field, we know the one satellite image we were looking at was creating a pocket over here, and that was a cloud shadow. But if that was when, disease really started taking off, or an insect infestation was starting to devastate a part of the field, then we can, because those satellite images are dated, we can really start understanding, so when did this start happening? Did that correlate with any weather events? Did it correlate with a hail storm? Did it correlate with a first frost or a cold snap or extreme drought or anything like that? We can really start using these satellite images as the for understanding that something has happened, but also when and potentially why it started happening. So there's lots of different ways that we can use the satellite imagery that's in your Climate FieldView account. And there's lots of different ways that we can access and play with it. I really encourage you to just jump into your account. You can't delete the images. You can't really mess with them in any way. So just open them up, look at them. I do always say it's one thing for me to come on here and show you things, but at the end of the day, these aren't your fields. And you don't really know what the elevation or the soil changes or things like that are in this field. So it's hard to totally understand the story. But when you just spend time with fields that are in your actual account and start looking through them, I think you'll really start seeing how they bring value to yourself because you understand the context of what's going on in that field. So like I said, I encourage you to jump into either the full app or the cab app and just start looking through those images, comparing them to other map layers that you've collected in your fields, and just trying to use them to make sense of the things that have happened either in the past on your operation or things that come up as we enter harvest this fall. So I think that's all I had for today's presentation. We are at roughly 11:30. So if there are any questions, please feel free to type them into that chat box. But yeah, that's kind of all I had to share today. Following this presentation, we will follow up with any questions that I can't answer if those do come up. And then, as I mentioned, this was recorded and will be placed on YouTube. So if you need to refer back to it, or if you think of something down the road and you want to have a refresher, definitely go to our YouTube page and check out the videos there. Of course, always feel free to report team, whether that's calling into the 1-800 number or contacting your retailer or somebody that you work with in the field. Reach out to any of us. We're happy to help at any time. So with that, Deneen, did any questions come through?
No, we don't have any questions right now.
No questions? Okay, I will give it a couple minutes. If folks want to hop off, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad to have the opportunity to present to you today. And yeah, like I said, any questions, please type them in. But otherwise, if you want to hop off, that's great too.